loved cadet before he was commissioned. Later in his military career, he became the first Nigerian to be trained in military intelligence. My close association with him commenced from the moment that I arrived to be enlisted into the Nigerian Army. Hang on, I want to ask something. Do we still have that link, the lip sinking, or are we already suffering delay? Are we already suffering any delay, or we already have the sinking voice still there, right? Everything is still fine. I don't know, I just observed something there, and I was like, is that like, Anyway, let me continue. My close association with him commenced, read that. He received me most warmly and taking me, thank you, and taking me around the depot, showed me to all the warrant officers, that is the sergeant majors, and the young newly commissioned Nigerian officers. He introduced me as a former DO, that is district officer. The warrant officers were mainly northerners, and the description DO meant a lot to them, and indeed to other Nigerians, because only British, white civil servants, and a few Nigerians rose to such posts in the pre-independence northern Nigeria. And it was still largely so in 1961. Chukwuma initiated me into the army, and I loved the way he did it, simplifying the strange military terms such as the enemy, moving targets, and the first LA, immediate action, and so on. He continuously assured me that every new step was extremely easy to take. He drilled me and taught me weapon handling personally. He then put his personal car at my disposal, even though I was totally new in Zaria and had nowhere at all to go. Still, he came around and made sure that we went out together. Having departed for the UK, I did not meet Nzeogwu again until late 1962. By then, he was a staff officer at the Army headquarters in Lagos. He visited me at Abeokuta and renewed our friendship very heartily and saw each other often until military duties separated us for a short while. Then in December 1963, I was posted to the 5th Battalion in Kaduna. A few months later, Nzeogwu was posted to the NMTC in Kaduna. We were both single, unmarried officers. Before Nzeogwu arrived in Kaduna, I lived in the quarters meant for unmarried officers. I was sharing a 2-bedroom bungalow with Captain Olusegun Obasanjo, who, although married, lived without his wife at that time. He was away for some time, and Nzeogwu came and took over his room. Obasanjo was also Nzeogwu's friend, so that whenever he was around, he shared the same room, the same bed with Nzeogwu. At that time, Obasanjo was in the Nigerian Army Engineering Corps, NAHEC. He was a quiet, colorless, and easygoing officer who did not attract any personal recognition and would not be reckoned with as a revolutionary. His friendship with Nzeogwu derived mainly from the latter's ready friendliness towards all officers that were close to him. Living with Nzeogwu gave me a deep insight into his character. He was the son of a civil servant. His parents hailed from Asaba in the Midwest, now Bendel. But he was born in Kaduna, schooled there, and grew up there. He spoke Hausa very fluently, and he understood and had many Hausa traits. I knew him to be extremely straightforward, open-hearted, and open-handed. He spoke freely, hiding nothing, He gave generously. He was a good Christian, Roman Catholic, and attended Mass regularly. Unlike most single officers, he did not go around with girlfriends. This surprised me, for although we both agreed that there was no question of getting married before the revolution, I did not subscribe to total abstinence. Nzeogwu was a good leader of men. The same could not be said of 90% of the officers. He drew the younger officers irresistibly to himself. Endeavoring always to awaken in them both political and revolutionary consciousness, and above all, patriotism. He spoke amusingly, and all the young officers that had passed through his hands in the NMTC cherished him and held him in high esteem. Throughout 1965, Nzeogwu spoke freely and openly to some young officers about his intention to stage a revolution, which would bring Nigeria to the path of greatness. All the young officers loved the idea and came closer to him. But the same could not be said of the middle level and senior officers. That is majors, colonels, brigadiers, and above. In 1965, Nigeria had only one major general, that is JT Agoyin-Ironsi, the GOC of the army. There were 3 brigadiers, Ademulegun, Mai Malari, and Ogundipe. 3 colonels, Adebayo, Kor Mohammed, and Shodeinde, and a few lieutenant colonels, and many majors. The senior officers, that is, colonels and above, were totally committed to the Balewa government and were preoccupied with sustaining Balewa in power and preserving themselves in the upper hierarchy of the army. When we labeled an officer as not being political, we meant that the officer did not understand the principles and practices of a political army. We did not imply that the officer did not understand the Nigerian political game of you chop, I chop, or you wash my hand, I wash your hands, or he is my brother and I must support him, and so on. Of the lieutenant colonels, only 2 were known to be political and revolutionary and were willing to take part in any effort to revolutionize Nigeria. These were Lieutenant Colonel Banjo and Fajui. For reasons that are later explained, neither of them actually took part in the coup of January 15. Lieutenant Colonel Ojukwu and Unjoku were unsure and preferred to adopt the "if you boys succeed, we shall go along with you" attitude. The others were committed to the Balewa government like their senior ranks. One of them, Lieutenant Colonel Lagema, who was then commanding the 4th Battalion in Ibadan, was known to be publicly associated with the Akintola government and taught the premier and his ministers the use of fighting weapons like rifles and submachine guns. The majors were a mixed grill, many of them non-revolutionary and indifferent. Majority of them were committed through their allegiance to specific senior officers, to the Balewa government. So that only a handful were revolutionary and willing to take part in changing the order of things. These few actually took part in the coup. I had earlier related my first meeting with Lieutenant Ifejuana in the days prior to my enlistment into the army. That is, at the time, I went before the selection board. Then we reached the conclusion that it was the military that was likely to provide the ultimate solution to the Nigerian problems, political problems. We bore this in mind and did not have to reconsider the matter. It was always a question of when the hour comes. In December 1963, when we were together in Kaduna, Ifejuana and I moved closer to each other and discussed vital political, intellectual, and revolutionary matters. Since Ifejona's wife was not around at the time, he lived in the single officer's quarters. So that we were able most of the time, we were together most of the time. Unlike Unzeogu, Ifejona was a relatively quiet and more secretive personality with a rather complicated character. On the one hand, he was intensely political and revolutionary. On the other, he was not very open-hearted and did not naturally attract many young officers to himself. Nevertheless, he was very influential among the ones that were close to him. Like Unzeogu, Ifejona was open-handed, generous, and was willing to sacrifice anything for the revolution. But at the same time, he always wanted to be in the good books of the senior officers in order to ensure his promotion in any event. These conflicting desires often clashed within him, making him inconsistent. Ifejona, that's him. That's a young officer. Man, there's another thing about these officers, right? They were so young. I'm talking about officers who were in their 20s. Those are the ones who are talking about revolution, talking about the country. Military officers in their 20s, in their mid-20s, late 20s, early 30s. Look at Ifejona. That's him. A very, very young man. I don't know his age. I don't know his age in this picture, okay? It was a very, very young officers. They were young officers who felt like their future was to be mortgaged by the criminal politicians in Nigeria. And decided to do something before the politicians finished their future, ruined their lives. So they put their lives on the line. Anyway, let's continue. So according to him, Ifejona was inconsistent and at times unreliable. Like Unzeogu, I believed that a revolutionary had to be single-minded and devoted to his ideals in complete disregard of his personal fortune and safety. Ifejona left Kaduna for India late in April 1964, and when he returned later that year, he was posted to Apapa. Sorry, he was posted to Lagos as the brigade major of the 2nd Brigade based at Apapa. It was not until I moved down to Abeokuta in September 1965 that we got in close touch with each other again. Captain Christian Anuforo was one of the best officers of the Nigerian Army. He went to Sandust and was commissioned in 1960. My first intimate knowledge of him started in Kaduna in 1964 when he was commanding the newly formed reconnaissance squadron. He had a highly affable and warm personality. His sight was quick and penetrating. When Anuforo spoke, he was incisive, direct, and yet humorous. He was a soldier of great courage. In Kaduna, we shared He was incisive, direct, and yet humorous. When we were together in Kaduna, we shared games and social activities. When we discussed politics, one could see that he knew his subject very well, and we always agreed. I left Anuforo in Kaduna in December 1964. When I returned there in July 1965, he had left for Pakistan. He returned in October 1965 and was posted to the General Staff Branch, Army Headquarters, Lagos. By that time, I was in Abeokuta and we met often. Another shining light in the Nigerian Army was Captain Timothy Onwu Atuegu. He was the adjutant of the 5th Battalion when I joined that unit in December 1963. Onwu Atuegu was a brilliant cadet at Sandust and the first Nigerian to be made a junior under officer in that world-famous institution. He was unmarried when we first met, and we shared the mess life together. A Roman Catholic, he was active and could hardly be faulted in military duties. Because he was humble, senior officers found him useful, loyal, and dependable. At the same time, junior officers found it easy to work with him. He made himself like one of them. He was later posted to the NMTC and worked under Unzeogu before I joined that unit in July 1975. Like any other young officer around Unzeogu, his political ideas were soon formed and strengthened with revolutionary principles. Major Donatus Okafor was an officer commissioned from the ranks and was therefore not really revolutionary. He was brought in mainly because of the appointment which he held throughout 1965 and until January 1966 than for his revolutionary ideals and practices. This did not imply that an officer from the ranks could not be revolutionary or political. It could be. Only he would be a rare bird. Lieutenant Colonel Fajuyi was like that. He was revolutionary, political, and intensely patriotic. But then Lieutenant Colonel Fajuyi was an extremely brave soldier, which was why he won the Military Cross Award for an act of exemplary bravery during his service with the United Nations in the Congo, now Zaire. Donatus Okafor was not exactly like that. He was neither a revolutionary nor an idealist. He was rough-hewn and matter-of-fact. My close association with him started in March 1965 when we attended a battleground commander's course at the School of Infantry, Westminster, or Warminster, UK. The two of us were the only Nigerians on the course, and so we came together and compared notes. By the time we finished at Warminster, we had closed ranks a great deal, and later in the year, when he was brought into our revolutionary movement, I was inclined to accept him because of the experiences we had shared. Major Humphrey Shukuka, who with me survived the Civil War, was a Sandos-trained officer. He was commissioned in 1960. Of the 7 majors who eventually took part in the coup, he was the only one with whom I had no prior association. But unlike the others, he was the only one with whom I associated longest. He was the only one with whom, he was also the only one with whom I shared the experiences of the Midwest War. It was during this time that I really came to know more about him than I did before the coup. Humphrey was a resolute soldier. He was plain, frank, devoted, and reliable. He had neither the decisiveness of Anuforo nor the untiring endurance of Onwu Atuegu. Nevertheless, he was active and quietly determined. Politically, he resolutely clung to the revolutionary ideals and practices. By late 1965, Humphrey was working in the A branch of the Army headquarters in Lagos. It was during this time that we associated together in preparation for the coup. Today, if one were to ask, when did the preparation for the revolution really begin? The most accurate answer would be from 1961. Because the 3 of us who formed the nucleus of the revolutionary group had met in that year. Although we had not there and then planned a revolution, we had seen eye to eye and we knew that we had a common cause. It was as if the seed was sown at that time and only needed time to germinate, grow, and bear fruit. But these meetings were between Ifejuana and me. on the one side and between Nzeogu and me on the other. This pattern remained almost the same throughout. Active preparation now. The preparation for the coup started to warm up by July 1965 because by that time, the matter was more seriously and urgently discussed. Moreover, active efforts were made to get in touch with more officers of the army so as to ascertain their inclination and loyalties. These contacts were made most quietly and surreptitiously. A coup d'etat is not a conventional operation of the army. Preparation for it could not at any time be done in the open or in plain language. Therefore, when we discuss with officers, unless an officer showed serious interest, we always sounded casual, and the matter was generally left unspecified and inconclusive. Moreover, while Nzeogu and I were making concerted efforts in Kaduna, Ifeanyi was preoccupied with making similar efforts in Lagos. And the two efforts were not brought together until October 1965, when my own branch of the NMTC was moving from Kaduna to Abeokuta in early September 1965. I left Nzeogu with the understanding that our efforts were to continue in the south as it had been in the north. Moreover, efforts were to be made to find troops for the operation. The biggest problem that we faced was finding troops for the operation in the south. There were only 3 battalions in southern Nigeria in those days. One was stationed in Enugu under the command of Major Ogunewe, who was an officer commissioned from the ranks and was known to be totally conservative, apolitical, and loyal to the Balewa government. However, Major Chud Soke, a revolutionary-minded senior officer of the unit, was our contact in Enugu. He was Sandos trained. He was in touch with Ifeanyi and was willing to match his words with actions. Another battalion was located in Ibadan, a very strategic position. But the commander of the unit, Lieutenant Colonel Lagema, was aggressively committed to the Balewa government, and his unit was being used politically to suppress anti-Akintola uprisings. The only answer was to find suitable officers in the battalion who would be willing to bring out sizable troops of the unit for our purpose. When all the officers of the unit were assessed, only 2 seemed likely to respond favorably. Hence, they were approached. One was a captain who promptly turned down the idea. The other was a major who not only refused, but threatened to report the matter to his commanding officer, whom he knew would deal ruthlessly with us. So we ended up flattering him and assuring him that we were only joking. That put an end to the idea of using Ibadan troops. In the whole of Lagos, there was only the Federal Guards Company as the ready combatant unit. But the 2nd Battalion was in the process of getting settled at Ikeja Cantonment. The Federal Guards Company was commanded by Major Donatus Okafor. Mentioned earlier, he had been approached by Major Ifeanyi and had promised to turn his troop to our use. Although his words sounded hollow, they were not so easy to throw away or reject. In the army, unless troops were placed directly under one's command, one could not pull them out on operations. If the troops commander said he would bring them out, it was not all that one could wish for, because merely saying so was not sufficient. This was where the situation in the south differed a great deal from that of the north. In the north, the NMTC had been in existence for 6 years, and its powers were established. It was at first an officers' cadet school. From 1964, it became a center for the training of the newly commissioned officers. For this purpose, it always had a demonstration company plus supporting services under its command. In effect, the unit always had its own troops available for its exercises. Nzeogwu was largely instrumental to the build-up of this ever-ready body of fighting troops. It consisted of a company of infantry and subunits of supporting arms and services, such as the artillery, mortars, reconnaissance troops, engineers, and transports. As soon as he had achieved this build-up officially, he kept the troops always available for various exercises which he organized. The subunit of the NMTC, which was moved to Abeokuta in early September 1965, was a brand new Colonel Adekunle Fajuyi. Was a brand new subunit placed under the command of Lieutenant Colonel Adekunle Fajuyi. We were to assemble the fighting troops and supporting services of this subunit in Abeokuta for the first time. We were to run a battleground commander's course for captains and majors, and it was the highest course to be run in Nigeria at that time. Therefore, it tapped the resources of the whole army to the fullest. The dates and facilities for the course were fixed and arranged by the army headquarters, and there was practically no room for flexibility in the matter. Moreover, because of the disturbed political situation in Western Nigeria and Lagos at that time, the movement and deployment of troops were very closely watched. There was hardly any room for unauthorized, arid, unscheduled exercises. This meant that there could be no dry runs or rehearsals of our planned secret operation. For this reason, there was no way of proving the fidelity of Donatus Okafor's promise to bring out his troops for our use. Also, when Ifeanyi told me over and over again that he had arranged some troops of the brigade headquarters at Apapa to come out with weapons and ammunition on the D-Day, there was no way of testing the effectiveness of the arrangements. All the same, preparation had to go ahead. Contacts made, dates fixed, and other actions performed. Of course, there was the 2nd Battalion at that time being settled at Ikeja Cantonment. They had just been moved from Abeokuta and were temporarily commanded by Major Anago, a Cameroonian. Again, no one was found in the battalion to support the idea of the revolution, let alone bring out troops for the operation. Hence, as far as Lagos was concerned, only the Federal Guard seems likely to be turned out for our cause. As we assembled troops and services for the battle group course, we saw a ray of hope. There were to be a few new units which would be permanently stationed in Abeokuta. These were a field battery of artillery and a squadron of the Reconnaissance Corps. These two small units, each having no more than 30 combatmen, would always be there for our possible use. The battery was commanded by Captain Nwobosi, a young Sandos-trained officer who was of a ready and enthusiastic disposition. He was an efficient and unassuming soldier who faced promptly to his duty. He absorbed and embraced the ideals of the revolution and was poised for its realization. The Reconnaissance Squadron was commanded by Major Obienu. He was also Sandos trained, but was less inclined to take seriously to the details of his duties. His attention was drawn more to the glamour than to the responsibility of his appointment. But he assured us that he was with us and that he was prepared and willing to bring out his troops for the purpose. With this consent, it seemed as if we had the nucleus of 3 small units for our use in the Lagos-Ibadan axis. The Enugu axis was settled, and the preparation continued. When the battle camp course began in Abeokuta in mid-September 1965, we assembled demonstration troops, including an infantry company of about 150 men from the 2nd Battalion based in Ikeja. The commander was Captain Agbazue, a non-political and non-committal officer whose grip and control of the corps of the troops was neither strong nor personal enough to render the men loyal to him and responsive to revolutionary ideas. It was usually in those days, and perhaps still so today, for most officers not to realize that a very close attachment was necessary between themselves and their troops to generate mutual love and confidence, and to make the exchange ideas possible. This personal touch, which was lacking in most Nigerian officers, was a peculiar and active attribute of Unzeogu, and a few of us who really believed in and embraced the idea of a revolution. With it, we were able to draw younger officers and men closer to ourselves, and so influence them more than other officers did. Although there were three other majors running the course with me, namely Unzefili, Adegoke, and Bisala, I was able to draw Agbazwe and his men closer to me, so that if the coup was to have taken place earlier than it did, that infantry company would be available for our use. None of my colleagues was interested in the idea of a revolution. Major Unzefili was always devoted to other facets of military life. Major Adegoke, too, was more involved in the other sides of life and have nothing to do with our plan. Major Bisala was serious, but was committed to the Balewa government and would consider nothing to the contrary. However, Lieutenant Colonel Fajuyi, who commanded the corps, had sympathy for our cause and was willing to contribute ideas towards the execution of our plan. It shall stand entirely to his credit that although the coup took place while he was away on leave, he rose for the revolution and stood firmly by his principles, even until he breathed his last. It was in mid-November 1965 that we held one and only formal meeting that preceded the coup. The meeting was held in Lagos, in the military quarters of Major Ipiajuna. Unzegu was there from Kaduna, and I from Abeokuta. Major Chude Soke was there from Enugu. Others were from Lagos, that is Okafor of the Federal Guards Company. Anuforo was there, and Chukwemeka from the Army headquarters was there. Chukwuka rather. The meeting was very short. There was a consensus among us that something had to be done quickly to save Nigeria from anarchy and disintegration, and to save Nigeria, and to restore peace and unity to the nation. It was agreed that only the use of force could bring immediate end to the violence being perpetrated in many parts of the country. It was, however, agreed that the use of force should be minimal. Political leaders and their military collaborators were to be arrested. But wherever an arrest was resisted, it was to be met with force. Otherwise, no one was to be killed. Only the heads of government, that is, the Prime Minister, the four regional premiers, and their right-hand men, were considered most essential to arrest throughout the country. And amongst their military collaborators, only the top echelon and those holding strategic positions were named for arrest. This included the GOC of the Nigerian Army, General Ironsi, the commanders of the two brigades, Brigadiers Ademulegun and Maimalari, the Chief of Staff Army Headquarters, Colonel Kor Mohammed, and the Adjutant General of the Army, Lieutenant Colonel Pam. Others were the Deputy Commander of the NDA, Colonel Shodeinde, the Quartermasters General of the Army, Lieutenant Colonel Unegbe, and the Commander of the 4th Battalion, which was based in Ibadan and was the most politicized unit of the Army, Lieutenant Colonel Lagema. Contrary to the load of wicked propaganda that had since been heaped upon us, there was no decision at our meeting to single out any particular ethnic group for elimination or destruction. Our intentions were honorable, our views were national, and our goals were idealistic. We intended that the coup should be national in execution so that it will receive nationwide acclamation. We planned that the use of force should be minimal so that our methods could at once be seen as superior to those of the politicians who simply went on killing the very people that they were called upon to serve or govern. It will be recalled that by late 1965, the efforts of the Balewa government to normalize the top echelon of the army were already bearing fruit. Some northerners were already holding most of the strategic positions in the army. Those positions could easily be used to thwart our attempt. Hang on, I think, no, I don't think I'm going to finish it. My time is not going to let me finish this. Guys, no, I don't think I'm going to finish this until due day. So I'm just going to put a hold on this once I finish this part, okay? And then we'll continue later, all right? It is still going to be about the preparation. In fact, we should stop it now. You know why we should? I need enough time for me to prepare for my program later in the evening. Do you know what that means, right? I need to get all of what I'm going to need for the program later this evening. And this can take me another hour just to finish that chapter. So I'm not going to finish it. I'm going to continue it tomorrow. And I hope you will be tuning in around that time, okay? So thank you so much. Thank you so much for this. We will continue some other time. And if you joined midway for some reason, right, you can watch it from the start again. So we've done chapter 1, we've done chapter 2, 3, and then we are currently on chapter 4, and it's chapter 4, page 84. So thank you so much, everyone. I will see you later. Let's go get ready for tonight. And should I give you the hint of what tonight is going to be about? It is going to be about the reactions of some of these, these shameless people from northern Nigeria who took the advantage of Peter Obi's generosity, giving them water, only for them to turn around and say, troll him and the rest of that. And this has prompted a lot of discussion now to say the southern politicians or the southern will-be politicians, they love to go to northern Nigeria to try and appease them. And so far, that has made the people of this Sharia North mostly, it's a bit complex, okay? It has made them more entitled, kind of. Somebody do water for you. Water will they not do for you for 63 years of the Fulani rule in that region. Somebody came and do the water, and they started saying, oh, what kind of water is this? But yet, do you know that now only Southerner, they go there, go build school. Go to the north, go build hospital. Go to the north, go build boreholes. How many northerners, how many these northern leaders, northern terrorists, how many boreholes have they built in eastern Nigeria, in Igbo land? How many of this, how many of this development and philanthropy that a lot of your southern politicians go to the north to go and say, we are trying to help the north, all right? How many of those northerners, all those northern criminals, how many of them have come to Igbo land to come and construct borehole or come and do one philanthropy project there? How many have you ever seen? How many of these northerners have you seen come to Yoruba land to come and drill borehole and say, oh, we just came there to come and support and help the people in this community? But yet, the Marafoka entitled wearies, they have been latching on it, and I'm gonna run a program on that tonight. I promise it's going to be interesting. Tomorrow, go get ready for it. All right, addressing that entitlement of these freeloaders, scavengers, the parasite region of Nigeria. Okay, yeah, I'm going to talk more about that tonight. So you better get ready. I'll see you later tonight. Thank you.
Mayegun làwa mọ̀ làmọ̀ tó dòdòdò.
Mayegun Diary Ayébi #1.
Mayegun làwa mọ̀ làmọ̀ tó dòdòdò.